afternoon, good morning, good evening. This is Ernest, and I am the preacher at Silang Church of Christ, located in Silang, Cavite, in the Philippines. I wish to say thank you for joining us today. By the way, before we get started, down there, down there, like, subscribe, hit the little bell button so you can be notified whenever we go online. And also, please leave comments if there's something you don't understand or something you agree with or something I can explain better. Please just go ahead and tell us about it. We are in the process of studying, you and I, about finding peace, dealing with adversity. We have to know what James tells us in James chapter 1, verse 12, that blessed is the man that perseveres under trial, because when he has stood the test, he will receive the crown of life that God has promised to those who love him. We have to deal with trials. There will always be trials. There will always be troubles. There will always be tribulations. There will always be adversity in our life. Now, if James chapter 1, verse 2, if James is speaking of a crown of life with reference to heaven, that's wonderful. But is there no other blessing that comes from enduring the trials of life? Well, you're in James chapter 1, verse 12. Go to James chapter 1, verse 2. Count it all joy when you fall into various trials, knowing that the testing of your faith produces patience. But let patience have its perfect work, that you may be perfect and complete, lacking nothing. Suffering the trials of this life, suffering the troubles of this life, can also help us to learn true obedience as Jesus Christ did. Hebrews chapter 5, verse 8. Although he was a son, he learned obedience from the things which he has suffered. So trials are really a way of bringing about patience and therefore true obedience in our lives, and thereby maturing us in the faith. But isn't there something else we need in the midst of adversity, in the midst of our trials, when everything is going bad? By the way, right now we're undergoing COVID and its own challenge. Would that be a blessing to us? I believe that there is a great peace that can come to us while we are enduring the trials of life, and that is peace. So what is peace? The term peace can be used in reference to many things. There can be peace between two individuals. There can be peace between two nations, such as the ceasing of hostilities. There is a freedom from strife. Peace can also mean a feeling of security and safety that makes peace possible. It has been used for centuries as a greeting between individuals by wishing the best for the other person's life. Peace be with you. By the way, as a converted Roman Catholic, I can tell you, peace be with you is a greeting that is common within the Catholic faith. We are wishing health, prosperity, and well-being on each other. There is a concept of peace between human beings. There is a concept of peace with God. And there is also an internal peace, or a peace within a person. And we're going to take a look at those briefly. Peace with other humans. Job chapter 14, verse 1 says, Man that is born of woman is of few days and full of trouble. And doesn't it seem like that sometimes in our lives? It seems that a man is constantly being challenged to face all kinds of trials and afflictions. This is true for the non-Christian. It is also true for the Christian. Every life is shaped to some degree or another by how we deal with these trials, how we handle these afflictions. But many of the trials we face can come from other human beings. Just think about it. If we could survive by ourselves and we didn't need other human beings around us, many of our frustrations, many of our troubles, much of the drama, as we refer to it, would be gone from our lives. But since that is not the way man is made, Genesis 2:18, we have to learn how to get along with other people. Other people can be a blessing, and other people can be a curse in our lives, depending on how we deal with these other people. Scripture certainly has some instructions on how we are to deal with others. Romans chapter 12, verse 10 says, "Be kindly, affectionate to one another, in honor, giving preference to one another." Romans chapter 12, verse 14 says, "Bless those who persecute you." Romans chapter 12, verse 15, rejoicing and weeping are mentioned. Romans chapter 12, verse 16, be of the same mind towards each other. Associate with the humble. Do not be wise in your own understanding. Romans 12:17, repay no one evil for evil. Do not avenge yourselves. Romans 12:19. Romans 12:21, do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. Why do we get all of these instructions, particularly in Romans chapter 12? It is kind of obvious, don't you think? He gives the answer in verse 18. If it is possible, as much as it depends on you, live peaceably with all men. Jesus spoke in Matthew chapter 5, verse 10, and he said, peacemakers, they shall be called the sons of God. Want to be a son or a daughter of God? You must be known as a peacemaker. And it is obvious that to live in peace with one another is itself a great blessing. Paul instructed the Ephesians in Ephesians chapter 4, verses 1 through 3. Endeavor to keep the unity of the Spirit in the bond of peace. And James 3:18 says, now the fruit of righteousness is sown in peace by those who make peace. If you are going to be a child of God, you must be known as a peacemaker, a person who calms problems. Now, that's how we have peace with other men. Peace with God. Our problem, man's problem, woman's problem, mankind's problem with God is that we want to do our own thing rather than do what God tells us to do. We often think that we know better than God. We may not say that we know better. However, when God gives us instructions and we choose to do otherwise, our actions speak louder than our words. Of course, a person is deceived or self-deceived into believing that they know better than God. In order to have peace with God, we need a redeemer that can reconcile God and mankind. And our redeemer is Jesus Christ, the Son of God. He had to come and pay the penalty for our sin, for our rebellion against God, in order for God to justly forgive us. He died so that we can be reconciled to God. 2 Corinthians 5:19. God was in Christ reconciling the world to himself, not imputing their trespasses to them, and has committed to us the word of reconciliation. This is the reason in Isaiah 9:6 that Jesus Christ is not referred to as the Prince of Peace. And it's also the reason why the gospel is referred to as the gospel of peace in Ephesians 6:15. It is God's message to man to let him know that reconciliation is possible from God's point of view. But at the same time, it is a message to let the wicked know that there is no peace for them unless they are reconciled to God. Jeremiah 6:14. A willingness on man's part to be reconciled to God is necessary. You must have the willingness, or you cannot be reconciled to God. To have peace requires that both parties be willing to have peace and do their part to make for peace. God has done his part and is willing to be reconciled to man. Now, man must want to be at peace with God as well, and must do his part to have peace with God. Oftentimes, the big stumbling block for man is his pride. When we are proud, we have a problem with God. James chapter 4, verse 6 says, God resists the proud, but gives grace to the humble. And Jesus said, assuredly I say to you, unless you are converted and become as little children, you will by no means enter the kingdom of heaven. Matthew 18:3. Humility on our part is an absolute requirement if we are to be at peace with God. To think or feel that one is at peace with God, we must be willing to submit to God. And if we are unwilling to submit to God, all we are doing is deceiving ourselves. Man's reconciliation, our reconciliation with God, comes through faith that is a submission to God's will. We die to the old life of rebellion and become an obedient servant of God. Romans 6:1-4. This peace, this tranquility of our soul comes from having a proper relationship with God. So we have peace with mankind, we have peace with God, and now we need peace within ourselves. It should be obvious that if we are at peace with God and at peace with our fellow man, then there should be a calm assurance. All is well. Or as the song says, it is well with my soul. However, there's a problem. We can be at peace with our fellow man only to the extent that he allows us. And there are a lot of times when nothing seems to bring about that peace. This is the reason that wars are fought and sometimes must be. This may be the only way to bring about peace. One of the problems the early Christians were going to face was that there was going to be persecution. The persecution was certain, 2 Timothy 3:21. It is not something that was unusual or strange, 1 Peter 4:12. Even Jesus Christ was persecuted, 1 Peter 2:21. Jesus told the apostles they would be persecuted and killed, Matthew 24:9. But the Revelation letter told about the beheaded souls for the testimony of the Lord, Revelations chapter 6, verse 9. When we look at the information, Christians, we need to prepare ourselves for persecution. Not only will we have to face the common trials, troubles, afflictions that come to every person in this life. However, in addition, we also may have to face persecution for righteousness' sake. How can we possibly have peace in the midst of all of this? The answer is given in Philippians chapter 4, verse 6 and 7. Be anxious for nothing, but in everything, by prayer and supplication, with thanksgiving, let your request be made known to God, and the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your hearts and minds through Jesus Christ. Romans 8:28 tells us all things work together for the good of those who love God and have been called according to his purposes. Do you believe this? Have you placed your faith in the promises of God? He promises to love all of mankind, John 3:16. For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, so that whosoever believeth in him should not perish, but have everlasting life. His concern for all of his children, 1 Peter 5:6. All things work for the good of our eternal glory, Romans 8:28. That we have no reason to fear what men say and may do to us, Hebrews chapter 13, verses 5 and 6. He will not allow us to be tempted above what we can handle, 1 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 13. That we can do all things through Christ who gives us the strength that we need, Philippians 4:13. Why does God allow trials, suffering, troubles, afflictions, persecutions to come into our lives? James chapter 1, verses 2 through 4, to mature us. Matthew chapter 5, verse 10, to bless us, so that we can be tested and proven. 1 Peter chapter 1, verses 6 and 7, to produce the fruits of righteousness. Hebrews chapter 12, verses 5 through 12. Look, the truth is, we are going to have trouble. And as Christians, we are frequently going to have more trouble than other people do. We will pray that your trials and tribulations pass, and we want everyone to have a blessed day. Come back and see us. Join us back at the station. Leave a comment below so I can know what you think. See you next time.